Now look, every now and then we come across a story that stops you in your tracks. Not because of the crime itself, but because of what it says about a broken system and the broken people it leaves behind. Now make sure y'all sit back and relax and tune in, because we're about to dive into the crazy story of Derrick Groves, a 4-time convicted unaliver that just recently escaped from one of the most secured prisons in New Orleans. Welcome back to another episode of Eyes Low, Belly Full. As y'all know, this marks episode number 49. And before we dive in, this isn't just a story about a jailbreak. This is a story about corruption, generational trauma, and also a story about a grandson that's haunted by the shadow of a grandmother he never got to meet. Now, in one of the most crazy moments in New Orleans Police Department history, a police officer had an innocent mother unalived because she spoken out.
Kim Groves was a mother of 3 living in New Orleans' 9th Ward. She wasn't involved in the drug trade. She wasn't a criminal. She was just trying to live her life and raise her children in a neighborhood plagued by violence and corruption. But in October 1994, her life would be cut short in a brutal and senseless act of violence orchestrated by the very people who were supposed to protect her. Kim's story begins on the streets of the 9th Ward, where she witnessed something that no one should ever have to see. One day, she saw Len Davis and his partner Sammy Williams beating a young man they had mistaken for a suspect in a police shooting. The young man was pistol whipped and left bloodied and bruised. Kim knew this was wrong. She knew the police weren't above the law, and so she did something that most people in her neighborhood would never dare to do. She filed a formal complaint against Len Davis with the New Orleans Police Department. For a mother of 3, filing a complaint against a corrupt police officer was an act of extraordinary courage. In a neighborhood where the police were often as feared as the criminals, Kim stood up against the system. She wanted justice. But what she didn't know was that her brave act would set in motion a series of events that would lead to her demise. Davis was known as RoboCop in the streets. His large frame and aggressive policing style had earned him a reputation as someone who couldn't be crossed. And when he heard about Kim's complaint, he saw it as a threat to his power. He couldn't allow anyone to undermine his authority, especially not someone from the community he controlled through fear. Through the NOPD's internal system, Davis was tipped off about Kim's complaint by another officer. Furious, he decided to eliminate the problem. In his mind, Kim wasn't just a witness. She was a threat to his entire operation. The next day, Davis made a call to Paul Hardy, a local drug dealer and hitman who had been working with him for years. Davis gave Hardy a description of Kim Groves. He told him exactly where she could be found, and he made it clear what needed to be done. On October 14, 1994, just one day after Kim filed her complaint, Hardy approached her on the street near her home. She had just left her house and was walking when Hardy came up to her. As she looked up at him, perhaps thinking he was someone she knew, Hardy pulled out a gun. He fired one shot at Kim. She was unalived within minutes. Kim Groves wasn't involved in any criminal activity. She was just a mother, a neighbor, a citizen who wanted to make her community safer. But in the corrupt world of Len Davis, her life was expendable. Her murder was cold and calculated, ordered by a man who wore a badge and took an oath to protect the very people he destroyed. After Kim's death, the neighborhood was filled with fear. People whispered about what had happened, but no one dared to speak out. Everyone knew Davis was behind it. They knew what he was capable of. If he could silence Kim, what could he do to anyone else? But what Davis didn't know was that his empire of fear and corruption was starting to unravel. The murder of Kim Groves would not go unnoticed. This time, the consequences of his actions would be far greater than he ever imagined.
Davis was eventually convicted and sentenced to death. But that's not where the story ends, because Kim Groves had children, and those children had children. And one of those children was Derrick Groves. Now, Derrick never got to meet his grandmother, but her death defined him. I mean, just imagine growing up hearing stories about how your family tried to do the right thing, but they had to pay the ultimate price. And that type of trauma doesn't just linger. Sometimes it shapes you. And people close to Derrick say that his life was marked by tragedy early on, especially due to the unaliving of his brother. I mean, the streets weren't just dangerous. They were familiar. And the trust that most people are taught to have in law enforcement, guess what? Derrick wasn't never given that lesson. Instead, he grew up believing that the police killed his grandmother. And that just wasn't any type of conspiracy. That was actually a documented fact. Now, that's a different type of anger and a different type of wound. And it definitely festered. The system was never there to protect him. The system was actually the villain in his story. You feel me? And what happens when a black boy grows up thinking the world is against him? What happens? Now, Derrick Groves will go on and earn his reputation in the streets, one that will land him behind bars more than once. Being a 4-time convicted unaliver, he was no stranger to violence. One of his most shocking crimes took place Mardi Gras 2018, where a double homicide left 2 dead and 2 wounded.
Inmates, and he's still at large tonight. It is forcing witnesses into hiding. Ironically, he has a deep connection to one of the most notorious killings in New Orleans history. His grandmother was executed on order of corrupt cop Len Davis.
Today, investigative reporter Mike Pearlstein spoke exclusively to a neighbor who knew Derrick since he was a little kid.
Oh, I remember him from a baby.
Gail Slack helped raise Derrick Groves on Alamo Street in the lower Ninth Ward.
He was friends with my son. He taught my son how to ride a bike.
Slack said she was shocked when several years ago Groves was accused in 4 killings, leading to convictions on 2 counts of murder and 2 counts of manslaughter. Now she's growing more concerned by the day as Groves remains the subject of a massive manhunt following last week's jailbreak of 10 inmates from the Orleans Justice Center. Groves is one of 5 escapees still on the run.
I just hope that if they catch him, they don't hurt him.
She said Derrick came across to her as a normal kid, despite his grandmother being killed by a hitman on the orders of New Orleans police officer Len Davis. Derrick Groves was not yet born when his grandmother Kim was gunned down right here in front of the family home. But he remembers the site well, including times when it was used as a memorial in honor of his grandmother.
A small child like that hearing how his grandmother was killed by the police. Okay. Yeah, it had a big factor. But he's still my Derrick. He's still my baby. I like raised him. He's a lot of people just see the bad side of it.
If you could just give a message to him right now, what would you tell him?
Be safe and turn yourself in.
Mike Pearlstein, WWL, Louisiana.
The family of one of Groves' victims went into hiding after they learned of his escape, and DA Jason Williams said 2 of his prosecutors who helped convict Groves have fled the state. Crime Stoppers and federal authorities are offering a combined $20,000 reward. That is for any information leading to the capture of Groves or any of the other 4 remaining inmates.
It was even said that the 2 individuals that he unalived on at Mardi Gras was actually some descendant family members of the cop that actually unalived his grandmother, the cop that we previously discussed, Len Davis. Now, these weren't just acts of violence. They were actually actions of a man that been hardened by a life of chaos. And here's a question that haunts people. Was Derrick Groves born a monster, or was he made one? Now, psychologically, Derrick seems like the textbook case of inherited trauma. Studies actually show that children of homicide victims are significantly, more likely to suffer from PTSD, rage disorder, and social alienation. And when the killer is a cop, the trauma is magnified. Derrick didn't just lose a grandmother. He lost any faith in justice and the system. And it did nothing to help him process that. No intervention, no counseling, just more loss and more pain. And eventually, Derrick became exactly what society expected him to be. A statistic, a headline, a suspect. Just when you think the story couldn't get even more twisted. Remember Lynn Davis, the cop that ordered the execution of Kim Groves, who is Derrick Groves' grandmother? Well, he had his death sentence commuted to life in prison by President Joe Biden in 2024, just about a year before Derrick's escape. I mean, just imagine that. The man that had your grandmother unalive, his life spared by the government. I mean, it can't get no crazier than that. Now, Derrick's life is spiraling into darkness, but the man that had his grandmother unalived, life was spared by the government. You feel me? And that moment may have pushed Derrick over the edge because in his mind, the system chose to protect an unaliver in uniform. Again. Now, what's going on in Derrick's head now? Because he's not just running from prison bars. He's running from a life of betrayal. Betrayal from a city that forgot his family, and betrayal from a world that says he doesn't matter. Derrick Groves might be a fugitive, but he is also a product from a city that never healed. I mean, he's dangerous, but he's also human. And that makes this story more complicated than any mugshot or police report would ever show. So where does this story end? Derrick is still out there somewhere, but this story is bigger than him. It's about New Orleans. It's about justice. It's about what happens when trauma is inherited like a family name. It's about a little boy who never met his grandmother, and it's about a city who never made things right. Now, I want to hear what y'all think about this story. I'm talking about the backstory and how it connects to the current situation of him escaping from prison. Go ahead and let me know in the comments below. And also, if this video resonated with you, go ahead and give me a thumbs up. Hit that like button for me. And also subscribe and hit that bell notifications for more episodes. I'm going to catch y'all in the next one. Peace.